Hello, everybody. Hello, gamers. Welcome back to CIE 2025. Again, this is our fourth year running this event, and it's going to be our first panel for today. I'm your host, Z Lion, and we are going to be talking about esports infrastructure. I'm joined by my lovely panelists, Gabriel, Robert, and Jonathan. If you guys introduce yourselves and tell us what game have you guys been grinding the most today? I guess we'll start with you, Gabriel.
Sure. My name is Gabriel Zoltan Johan, also known as Invert. I've been a professional coach for about 7 years now, starting actually at the University of Toronto, downtown campus. Shout out Victoria College.
Oh yeah.
From there, transition into becoming an LCS coach, head coach for Academy and LCS on FlyQuest, Immortals, and Dignitas across my 5 years there. Now I currently run the Esports Coaches Guild, which is a professional development company to help raise the level of scholastic esports programs. And in terms of game I'm grinding right now, I know everyone's probably playing Claire Obscure, but I'm actually playing a lot of Final Fantasy, like the earlier ones at the moment, just because I'm a huge
Dang.
Magic the Gathering fan. It's a Final Fantasy set coming out, so I'm just getting reacquainted with some of my favorite Final Fantasy games. Right now, I'm at 10, but 6 and 12 and Tactics have a special place in my heart. So
Dang, nice and classic vibes, I see.
yeah,
Okay, I thought you were more gonna be like a Persona player for some reason, but
I love Persona
anyways,
too.
Persona's great. But
Yeah.
anyways, besides that point, moving on with Robert, if you could introduce yourself as well.
My name is Robert Yip. I am originally from Ireland. I've been in America for 8 years now. I started off in esports in 2011, working with StarCraft players, Smash players, and Dota players. So I was a performance coach with them. I joined LCS in 2015 as a performance coach. I became a head coach, back to performance coach, then to general manager, director of esports, and back to performance coach. I'm doing the full 360. My background is in sports psychology and strength and conditioning, so it's mostly a traditional sports kind of a background. Um, Games I'm playing, I used to play StarCraft, FIFA, League. I usually stick with one game at a time. Right now, I'm still playing League. I've been playing a little bit of Killing Floor, even though it's like a really old game, but my friends have been playing it on a server, and it's like really, really fun. And I dipped my toe into Valorant last week, and that's
Oh,
I've played like Call of Duty and Halo with controller, so I'm a newbie. So moving to mouse and keyboard for FPS is like very difficult, and it's such a hard game to play. I'm telling you, but it's
Valorant is
really
a
fun.
oh my god, Valorant is a slippery slope. Like coming from
Yeah.
a Valorant player who's been stuck in Diamond for 2 years, don't
Hey,
do
it's not bad.
it. No, it's
Diamond is good.
bad. I'm so washed. Now I'm flat. But anyways, besides the point, moving on. We're gonna be we also have the lovely Jonathan joining us. If you could introduce yourself as well as what game you've been grinding recently.
Yeah, I'm Jonathan McDaniel. I've spent most of my time on the more management side of the League of Legends world. So I started off with some time on C9, kind of going up through the academy system, hopping over to Golden Guardians, kind of doing more of the management stuff there before getting my big shot at CLG as the GM for the team, and then ultimately kept the GM spot through that NRG transition where we won the league and managed to get a pretty big placement at Worlds. So that was super exciting for me. And now I'm still kind of on the prowl looking for the next thing while volunteering some of my time with Esport Canada on the National Competitive Committee. And as far as games I'm
Dang.
playing, I am not immune to propaganda, so I'm playing a lot of Claire Obscura. It's been so good. It's actually crazy how good this game is.
Hey, sounds like an avid player. How many hours have you grinded so far? Be honest. Come on.
Over 30. Being
Okay.
unemployed is very powerful for grinding games.
Hey,
Yeah.
respectable numbers, okay? That Steam metric is probably looking really,
It
really good right
that game
now.
it's next on my Steam Deck for sure. Just like
Mm.
having his little travel buddy for sure.
Mhm. And yeah, and let's move on to the panel. So our panel today is going to be on esports infrastructure. And just to kind of broaden or kind of define what esports infrastructure is, I'll just open the floor to you guys. How would you guys define esports infrastructure and what are the most important components of esports infrastructure in you guys' opinion? Any
Yeah, I can jump
takers?
into this one. So I
Mhm.
guess for me, there's like a lot of elements to it because I think not every esport has the benefit of being on site. So like there is the on site elements like having a training facility, an office space, or some other like place that you go to actually, conduct your team. But outside of that, I think it's also like the people that go into it. Like, is there a person handling the schedule? Is there HR support? Is there legal support? Like all the different business elements that go into it. And then obviously, like, do you have a full-time coach? Do you have analysts and other support staff that are helping kind of bring that extra little like percentage marginal gain to your team?
And what about for you, Gabriel?
Yeah, I think it's such a broad subject because esports infrastructure can always reflect the competitive side and then the non-competitive side, right? You have these needs for, on the competitive side, all the things that Jonathan is talking about, and of course on the non-competitive side, you rightfully need like that kind of production infrastructure for the league that's running, the casters that are involved, even things that touch the space but aren't necessarily deeply involved are also pretty important parts of the infrastructure. We're talking about things like, how insurance gets involved, or like stuff involving finances and financial literacy. Honestly, it encompasses a lot of the panels that will be the future of this exhibition, right? A lot of those subjects there are going to be kind of part and parcel of what esports infrastructure entails, depending on the role in esports that you play. It's going to be different things kind of fusing together. I know for the three of us, we're deeply on the competitive side, so we do have that competitive focus and scope when it comes to this, but it does go beyond that as well. So just making note of that. We can't really cover all those bases in the short time that we have today.
100%. There's also like the legal portion of it as well, and there's different departments depending on the level of a competitive play, that you're participating in. So infrastructure is definitely kind of different based on that. What about for you, Robert? You also come from like more, you said like a traditional athletic background as well. So, but coming into esports, how would you define infrastructure in that sense?
When I came in, it looked really bad. Like there wasn't enough people, there wasn't enough specificity or specialization in certain roles. It was one person doing multiple jobs. Interestingly enough, after the money went away, it's gone back to that again. We've come full circle where it's like you have multiple people wearing multiple hats.
Mm,
I think what Gabe and Jonathan said is probably correct. It's the depth at which you have in your organization will basically be directly proportional to the infrastructure that you might think of when we talk about that from a like a the Koreans have a better infrastructure to talking about like talent pipelines and whatnot. But in the West, you have deliverables, you have I guess metrics to hit regarding, let's say, your sponsors. So you have, your branding, your marketing, you have your social media. They're all like kind of intertwined. From the competitive point of view, it's like your coach, your analyst, your assistant coaches. It goes all the way down to physiotherapists, sports psychologists, etc. And
mm,
for me, I guess it's less about like how deep it runs as in how many people you have, and more about, do you have the next immediate priority person in place? So there's no point having a sports psychologist if you don't have a great coach. There's no point having an analyst if you don't have a coach. So these things are really important depending on where your team is at, or what they
mm.
can afford for the most part.
I see. And like also, we touched on like earlier as well how there's also like the difference between collegiate level as well as like professional competitive play, right? I think I'm gonna direct this question first to you, Gabriel, because you actually have a background with UFT esports back when you were a student at UFT. Shout out, by the way, I'm also UFT esports. Okay. Anyways, aside a little shout out there. But anyways, going from collegiate level into a more professional setting, how would you say was like the difference between your esports infrastructure? Like, what were the limitations or advantages switching from collegiate to, I guess, more professional?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing, first and foremost, is always going to be time, and how time is utilized, and how your organization or club, in the case of U of T, uh, prepares you accordingly with that time, or what kind of resources they can devote with the time you have. Transitioning into professional, you're obviously going to have more time, and many different aspects of esports infrastructure affect your routine and affect your schedule and affect how you compete, just by virtue of existing and you needing more of that support, right? In my
Mm-hmm.
initial foray into FlyQuest, there was accommodations taken care of, meals taken care of, so that you can fully focus on the game itself and performing at the highest level. That simply doesn't exist in collegiate for the most part, right? Obviously, like very elite programs may jump into doing such a thing, but I would say the vast majority of those programs, including U of T, which for us, like I like to tell the story all the time, but when we attended CLOL finals in 2017, we didn't even have a uniform, right? we had to get Under Armour quarter zips from Riot Games in order to even participate in the photo shoots, because that's how little we were afforded on the infrastructure side to our team. So yeah, I think it's a combination of, because you have more time, they want the professional teams obviously want you to use that time to perform to the greatest version of yourself, and that means they try to cater as much as possible to doing so, whether again it's accommodation, diet, exercise as well. I know Robert's a big proponent of that and making sure that gets involved in things. So yeah, I think that's the biggest transition point is the time and how they make sure you optimize it for performance in the game specifically.
And I think also between not even just collegiate level and professional level, there would be very specific challenges or limitations or advantages from org to org, right? And I think, Jonathan, you've worked with Energy before, you worked with Cloud9, these really big organizations. For you, what were like the biggest differences or maybe the most common limitations for organizations when it came to esports infrastructure?
Yeah, I guess I'll also tee it up in a little more of an interesting angle, because there are some orgs that have been in this space. Like when CLG and Golden Guardians were around, they were basically part of a larger company. I think Shopify is in a similar boat where there's like a larger parent company where this is a small like business unit within that larger company. So you're going to
Hmm.
have access to dozens of like HR staff, legal staff, and other resources from within the company, just because of how like the sheer scope of it is so large. Whereas the Cloud9s and Energies of the world, even though they're very successful and pretty robust as far as esports is concerned, compared to like the monolithically large sports entities, they're tiny. So I think from that perspective, there's like a big discrepancy. But then comparing like more apples to apples, if you compare like an NRG and a C9 to other smaller kind of more endemic esports orgs, there is a very big like, well, they're in a dozen different games, so they do have an HR team that's not just a singular person, right? They have a legal
Hmm.
staff that's not just a singular general counsel. They have like some outside folks that help with specific things. There's specific folks doing contracts, and then there's potentially people on staff consistently to help out with any issues that might arise, whether it's like office lease issues or other random things. And then as far as the actual day-to-day support, you have upper management and even ownership in most cases that tend to understand the requirements of a competitive team better than someone who's just dipping their toes into the space, or who is just doesn't have the budget to hire a super robust staff to support a League of Legends team or whatever other team they may be kind of trying to help. And then obviously there's an even bigger drop off going into kind of collegiate and tier 2, where the resources are definitely not there. There's a lot of volunteering, there's a lot
Yeah.
of people who this is a like 20-hour a week commitment for them, where this isn't like it's not a full-time job, they're not compensated like that. And
Yeah,
in
or they're
Gabe's case,
augmented with work
Hmm.
studies or some
yeah,
equivalent. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. And then there's
Co-op
obviously,
co-op
Yeah.
opportunities and
yeah,
stuff
there's
like
obviously
that.
all the schools where like, there's even the discrepancy of like this is a, like a Maryville level collegiate program where everyone is, on full rides or something similar to that, and they're getting supported all
Mm.
the way through. And this is like the schedule is kind of accommodated to fit their scholastics and their athletics. Whereas, you have other schools where this is just 5 people who have kind of gotten together who happen to be enrolled at the same school and have entered the tournament. They have no
Mhm.
formal support whatsoever, and they're just trying to make it work. So I think there's a lot of tiers and levels to it, but ultimately
Mhm.
it just comes down to like it's kind of a resource battle, but not everyone uses those resources as effectively as they could, and so you still see those underdog stories happen pretty consistently.
Yeah, and I think you guys, all three of you guys have talked about how like because there's such a lack of like human resources, some people are kind of forced into taking multiple roles, not just maybe as a coach, but also as a team manager or like even a tournament organizer or event organizer for certain events for their brands, for the organizations that they work for. Robert, for you, like being so closely tied with players, did you have to take on multiple roles, not just as a coach, but also having to lead a team through like everything, manage down to their schedule, down to did they have their passports for an event, do they have these, like kind of basically being like a a teacher or even a babysitter for these
Team
teams
parent.
at this point. Yeah, a parent essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a parent, babysitter, prison warden. Like it all kind of falls under the same thing. It's like it's interesting because y- I feel like most good functioning teams have people that don't just technically stay in their lane. They have a speciality, but they're more than willing to help other people in other roles. So like I've done some very interesting things that you would do because you care for the
Hmm.
people around you. I've brought players to the hospital. I've prepared a player for his first date, ironed his clothes before he went out. Like I've done stuff like this. I've gone shopping with players. All these kind of things, and I think that it all helps build a rapport, especially in the team house era where you're all like living on top of each other. You're going to have to like learn to live together. It's like a college experience, and you're kind of paid to live together too, so you can't really have any bad experiences. So there's a lot of things like I could write a whole laundry list of things that I've done that are definitely not in the job description, but things that you would never say, it's not my job, it's for someone else, right? You're happy to do it. There's a bit of pride involved in like people doing things together. I think right now in esports, like the guys mentioned about like tier two, you have 5 people who just have each other and that's it, and a coach, and you do it part time. Maybe they're like a lot of people have to work because esports isn't paying all the bills these days. So you're working and then you're rushing back and having to practice with your team. And then you're doing that till like 10 or 11 at night. And then you're going to bed and you're waking up and you're going to work again. So like esports now is kind of taken 3 steps back, but I feel like it's gone back to a stage where it's a little bit more back to its roots rather than in a $50 million facility. It's like people who are building it up from the ground up. And for good or for bad, I think it's where we're at right now. And I think for college, people keep on saying it's the path to pro. It's less of a path to pro and more of just a continuation of continuing from esports from, let's say, high school into college, because a lot of in traditional sports the big attrition point is right after high school. Before you go into college, people drop off, and if you don't have that kind of impetus to pick up continue playing volleyball into college, they're just going to drop off sport entirely. So esports, at least it affords us the opportunity to, like, Gabe's point, it was just a gaming club, and right now an actual gaming club going to like CLOL finals and winning would not be heard of. You would have to be a varsity program for that to happen these days. So I think
Hmm.
like for me, the big thing is less about and it's weird coming from a competitive point, less about the competition aspect in esports and more about continuing participation and making sure that people have the ability to continue what they like doing in a setting that's very open to esports. Instead of having a big college facility, it's more about how can we make that net as wide as possible and give more people a chance to just continue what they love doing.
Yeah, just
Hmm.
to jump off that a little bit too, just thinking about infrastructure as a concept as like, these kinds of facilities writ large, but also systems as well that were kind of in place to speed up the development. These systems were propped up by venture capital money that desired a return, etc. And to Robert's point about us kind of going back to the roots and going back to I won't say square one, but going, don't pass go, move back a few spaces. uh it really is a ability and opportunity for us to build these spaces and these systems back out into things that are more meaningful and more valuable for people in the industry. Just as to take Robert's example of a esports training facility in a college that he briefly mentioned, like, a lot of those groups now, instead of just constraining it into like a specific group of people with card access and only for the teams to train, now it's just like a general you know uh internet cafe like experience for students of the entire
Hmm.
college, right? Just to give an example of how those spaces have changed, right? So it really is like a reset point in a sense for us to be able to redefine infrastructure and make it more meaningful instead of uh forcing it artificially through the like money injection that was previously available to the industry.
Hmm. And kind
I
of
think the
touching on.
term.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, sorry. Go
I was
for it.
gonna
Go
say,
for
like,
it.
the term structure kind of implies like some physicality to it. Let's say it's like a building or
Yes.
it's computers, but actually structure also means like systems. And I think that our Cloud9, they're still in the team house, Jonathan, right? I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure. So
predominantly,
like
yeah.
they're like number one in LCS, or LTA branding, and they're in the team house. They
LTA
have been
North,
doing that.
Robert. LTA
Yeah,
North.
true. And they're the team that's doing well, and they've been in a team house for a little bit, and they haven't really felt that need to jump out into a infrastructure of building a giant facility. And it's less about esports has never really been about the actual physical location. There's so many failed physical kind of offices these days. It's more about the
Mm,
actual system. So the same thing goes for colleges. I've dipped my toe in the college space in California for a bit, and a lot of people are investing money into esports now, like into facilities, into broadcasting equipment, into stages. And I feel like it's like watching history repeat itself regarding like 2015, 16, where all that money comes in and you're spending it on all this kind of like fancy bells and whistles. But the most important thing is the students. The most important thing is the system, the program itself, and bringing people in. It's less about having the best of the best because most of the competitive games now run on a toaster anyway. It doesn't really matter how good your computer is, and if you're spending like 50K on computers, it's a little bit overkill. So I kind of
mhm,
want people to think more about the actual system, like how we're the big thing we'll talk about later is probably developing like interest in middle schools and high schools going into college, but all the
mhm.
money, all the focus is on the college and the amount of money that's being pumped into the space right now, which can be a bit misleading.
Mhm. I think there's like from that point of view, you're talking about how a lot of money is being kind of invested into, these like brand deals with like, for example, these really big technology companies for like these 50K computers or branded kind of chairs, something like that, but they're not really focusing on systems. So really like to what extent, in your opinion, like would you say that like training facilities play a role in actual competitive success in esports?
Yeah, I think even just going back to the example that Robert brought up, right? Like there's the Cloud9 in the room of like they've never really gone into an office or a facility or anything like that, and they've always been perennially pretty successful in almost every game they touch. So there's clearly not like a necessity component here. It's more of a like, can you find a balance that works? Like, we kind of talked about this a bit before the panel started, but when I was on Golden Guardians, our office was basically just a random office suite inside of a larger office building that was being leased out. And this was, I think a year or so before COVID. So, we got in as they were filling out units, and then everything kind of paused. People weren't looking for commercial real estate, and so we kind of just sat in this office for like a couple of years where we were one of the few kind of consistent people in that office. And it worked pretty well for us. Obviously it wasn't a huge space, but like it had all of our practice rooms. We were able to kind of rent out the atrium and like the larger kind of common spaces of the office for any events or sponsorship obligations that we might have, and it worked pretty well. But it wasn't a thing that we owned. It wasn't a place that we could like perennially like rely on using. And eventually, as the building would start to fill out, we would have a lot more neighbors to be concerned with in terms of like how loud we were, or other space. Like the AC system wasn't lined up to our schedule at all, so we would have to pay extra to kind of turn the AC on weekends and stuff like that. So during kind of the pandemic, there was a lot of issues around, well, every game is on the weekend and we don't have AC, so we're having to like incur these extra costs because kind of the world of commercial real estate wasn't built for how esports worked. And so,
Mhm,
coming back to it all, I don't think there was necessarily like a competitive advantage other than the fact that we had a consistent space to ourselves that we could always reliably like walk into. And it wasn't that issue of like players living on top of each other and that also being the workplace. So there was definitely
mhm,
some, tangential benefits, but it always came with a cost. There was very rarely an opportunity for us to have a truly like cost-free benefit because we had invested in a facility or an office or something like that. So it really takes like
mhm.
a very intentional build out to build something where you're not having those massive trade-offs.
And I think for you, Gabriel, you've like also worked with like, Dignitas, you've worked with FlyQuest, and as you said, you worked with Immortals. Do you think these brands, like as esports has become like more mainstream and you're getting more big brand investors who maybe don't really understand esports' infrastructure, what the needs to build system a over kind of other investments, do you think they are at risk of, becoming more of a like investing into these expensive training facilities, they're becoming more a symbol of wealth rather than actually focusing on like competitive need or the player's need at
Yeah,
that point?
I think we're definitely past that point from the professional side of things. I think enough people have gotten burned on the professional side with these facilities that uh, because of that, these investors and these sponsors won't necessarily jump into it in the same way that I think there might be these concerns in the spaces under the professional scene, right?
Hmm.
So, uh, for example, dead org, so I don't care to bring up their name, but TSM like invested multi-million-dollar facility that was actually uh, right across the street from me when I was working at Dignitas. Literally, hop, skip,
Mm,
and a jump away in Playa Vista, California, and that was a massive investment that obviously you see today that org basically does not exist, and that investment basically went to nothing. Now there are quite a few different reasons. Jonathan talking about commercial real estate, and also talking about like whether your landlord is nice enough to you to accommodate things is a pretty important aspect
mhm,
to these facilities as well. Even from the gaming house side of things, there are some
mhm,
people who are landlords for who don't know what they're getting into potentially. I know Robert can we can speak about our time at FlyQuest with the FlyQuest house where that was certainly the case, right? Uh, Back in 2018, 2019. So I think it's to circle back to the question. I think the enough people on the professional side have been burned to that people can see the charred corpses around them when it comes to making those big investments, which is why we kind of see a pivot away from that, right? We have basic offices, the teams that I believe Dig still, for example, works out of their Verizon sponsored office, and the that
I
not
think I
anymore.
think I think they
I
might
don't think
be
so.
doing Team House right now.
Team House, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, and
mm,
and so to that extent, it's like moving away from it, and those who are still in it may still be in it from like legacy reasons or because they have a very long lease and whatnot. Um, but yeah, I just don't believe that we're going to see those big facilities anytime soon because of that history, and nor do I think they're entirely necessary, right? For the kinds of performance needs that teams have right now. A lot of maybe we'll cover this later when we get to the production side of things, but a lot of
mhm,
competition across esports is starting to go back to travel and being a little more international with that
mhm.
respect, which makes these offices and these facilities a lot less necessary when teams are constantly on the move.
Mm-hmm. And so instead of like, I'm guessing because there's been so many instances, as you said, of, these over investments in a way kind of
Yes.
lacking any result or actually ending up in failure and sometimes in catastrophic failure. What instead do you think brands are kind of moving towards in terms of investing into esports infrastructure? Do you think it's more towards advertising, or do you think it's in which side of development for esports infrastructure do you think they're now focusing on?
Yeah, I think advertising, sales, and partnerships are always going to be number one. People just like the industry as the set of eyeballs in a specific demographic that they cannot find anywhere else, and that is actually like one of the biggest benefits of being in this industry is that is a very difficult to transfer demographic to other partnership opportunities
Mm-hmm.
overall. I'm sure I've been yapping a ton. I'm sure the other two can speak to that as well. But that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of my perspective on it for now.
And so for Robert, you've seen like not just managing your teams, you've seen how the team like members and the competitors have actually engaged with fans. But how important do you think fan engagement and kind of audience retention is like a fan base to esports infrastructure?
It's it's probably the biggest part. It's kind of weird because when, let's say, when LCS started, back when it was LCS, actually, everyone tried to win. Everyone would accept the money from the devil, the bribe, because like, oh, cool, we got this extra cash injection. This team now has a VC sponsor. We need to get a VC sponsor. This team has a sponsor. We need to get someone else. And everyone tried to win, but unfortunately, back then, only one person could win, which is the same as it is now. So like, there was no one really building a fan base from it. It was only if you won or if you had very marketable players, they were kind of like your key selling points. And the teams that tried to win, pump a lot of money, and maybe pump in too much money and didn't win, they were kind of left at like a loss as to why they were doing it. So every year it became a shuffle. So the teams at the top, they kept on winning. It kind of snowballed a little bit. You get the better sponsors, you'd have the better deals, you might get a better facility. I think one point to make is that all of the big uh, training facilities, they're all pre-COVID. I think.
And
So
then COVID happened, and they all
yeah,
had to make very tough decisions on
Yeah.
how to use the space after. Yeah,
yeah, and
it was a
it
huge
changed
issue.
the, we talk about like fan base retention and whatnot, but it changed how people consumed media COVID compared to what it was before. Like I don't know if LCS or LTA North would be continuing on the rise for like the last 5 years or so if COVID didn't happen. But how people actually consume media and what they want to watch now, it's very kind of like parasocial. It's like we're going to watch someone watch something and see how they react, and we're following people instead of like following teams. So we're following brands, and that's where we see people putting money into the space for impressions. We're going to pay a professional esports team for impressions because they're in a tournament or playing in a world finals, or we're going to have some sort of sponsorship with Tarek or K-Drill because they have the eyes looking on them, and that's kind of how it is right now. It's less about we're going to give you 50 million for this esports team, go spend it how you wish. We're just kind of interested in having your our kind of logo on your jersey, and there's no strings attached. Now there's so many different strings attached for that money, and it's a lot less money. So in the beginning it was, here's a Logitech sponsorship, we'll give you peripherals and 20K, and then it was just like crypto money coming in, and now it's gone back to, well, what can you guarantee? Can you guarantee 100K impressions for this tournament or for this split? And then you have the teams that are working with a marketing department to deliver on that. They're creating content, they're marketing things, they're collecting all the metrics, and that's kind of how we've gotten to right now, where it's we're not going to give you free money. There has to be something tangible that you can show that's very, very measurable in order for you to get that money. So each team is kind of like looking for that right now. Even for for Riot, like this, they've gone from State Farm to Pagoda, and it's not like more the brand is them being one better than the other, but I'm pretty sure the deals have gotten smaller over time.
And
Yeah.
adding on to that, Jonathan, do you think this, like, kind of what Robert just said, has been exacerbated in recent years, at least to the prevalence of streaming? Because after or during COVID, you weren't able to go to a lot of these in-person events as much, so a lot more people had time to play games, and because of that, I personally think that Twitch and YouTube streaming and these other platforms became super big. So, do you think these strings attached was also due to the fact that a lot more people are like just more aware that streaming is so big?
Yeah, I think there was a bit of a false positive during the pandemic because to Robert's point, like everyone's kind of ability to digest and engage with different things was really limited. So your ability to go to an event and do a thing was pretty much moved to zero. So you had to engage online, you had to watch streams, you had to watch content that was accessible from your living room. And so everyone got the impression like, oh, our YouTube videos are doing better, our Twitch stream metrics for the league and our individual players are doing better. There's more eyes on the product. We're doing something right. And I think that was like the biggest mistake, is thinking that we had done something right as opposed to just being kind of the beneficiaries of just kind of the moment. And
Mm,
then after all of those eyes start being able to go outside, do what they were doing before, and kind of go back to some more normalcy, we saw the kind of bubble start to deflate a little bit, and there wasn't a like plan in place necessarily to kind of recapture those people. And so we lost a lot of fan engagement. There used to be diehard fans of specific organizations, like TSM fans would literally go to events their teams were no longer in. Like they either weren't even in the game anymore or hadn't qualified to the event, and they would start TSM chants, and the whole arena would be screaming it. That stuff has
mm,
kind of been relegated to a like League of Legends specific meme, and occasionally you'll see it at like a melee tournament or something. So like it's that like level of prevalence in the community and the culture of esports is kind of starting to dwindle. And to everyone's point, like eyes are more kind of parasocially on individuals. So if you have a group of 5 players who are not they're not streaming, they're not tweeting, they're not doing anything online where they have a very like visible media footprint, there's no way for a fan to kind of make that initial connection and start to follow and kind of create fandom. And this is something where on CLG, I kind of noticed this when I joined. There was this almost like aversion to asking for player resource. So in my experience,
mm,
the team would typically be kind of fragmented into like a marketing and like kind of business unit and a kind of competitive unit. And they would have to kind of like build a bridge across the two pieces to be like, okay, can we please use, player A for a video shoot on next Monday or something? And it would be like a negotiation almost. And it was like somewhat hostile sometimes. And I think at CLG when I had joined, it kind of gave me the impression that, oh, previously this had been like, don't even ask because the answer is no. And so I had to kind of rebuild things, be like, hey, like we want to do content. I think it's valuable for our players to do content. We have players who enjoy doing content. Like as long as we are limiting the friction here, like this is a fun for everyone kind of thing. And ultimately it's important for the fans. And luckily CLG was such a historic brand that, once we got the ball rolling, there was a lot of fan buy-in and we were able to kind of rebuild things. But the second that the NRG transition comes in, a lot of those fans didn't inherently come with, right? Because they were one of
Mm,
the few fan bases that were tied to an org. So a lot of fans, kind of followed along spiritually, following what they felt was a CLG team. But after the end of that year and the end of that run, I think a lot of them kind of either tuned out, pick a different team, or followed individual players more so. And we kind of saw more and more of the buy-in to like, I follow, 1 to 3 players, maybe 1 to 2 co-streamers, and I'm engaging with individuals as much as I possibly can. And it's kind of on teams, organizations, even like people like Riot, to find ways to engage fans and meet them where they are, while also casting the widest possible net to bring more people in. Because ultimately, this whole thing doesn't work if we don't have more people coming in.
mhm.
Yeah, I like to say that uh, we are part of the entertainment industry. At the end of the day, it is a competition, and of course, if you're in a competitive role, you should take it seriously as a competition. But the wider product is entertainment. It's the same in traditional sports, right? It's entertainment, but it is also competition. So the entertainment side is what funds and makes the competition so interesting, engaging, and prolific, right? So that is the be all end all for how the competition exists. We've done a horrible job in esports of fan engagement and fan retention writ large,
Mhm.
and I also, to the point about COVID, I think false positive is like a very, very apt way of putting it, because there were some horrific activations during COVID as well. Speaking specifically on League, thinking about like the State Farm
The dome.
Dugsdale Dimmadome, and then like even in other esports, like the way that production worked
Mhm.
during that time did not transition effectively to, even though the game itself is online, it is a game that it is a competition that can be played when other ones couldn't exist during that time. It just existed on a tier of production level and a tier of entertainment that was just markedly lower than it should have been, and I think that also contributed to retention issues.
And going on the kind of following up on that topic of production and broadcast, because I think a broadcast and production is so important, especially increasing your production value in order to have these like moments that fans will see. Oh, this is so cool that this organization is doing this with our teams. But you said how production has had their like rises and falls. Do you think the evolution of broadcast and production within the esports space has been more of a linear a kind of progression where it's just been improving slowly, or do you think it's been more like a roller coaster of ups and downs where some years it's great and then you hit this kind of dip where things are just completely a mess?
No, I actually think esports production has gone much, much better over the years overall. I think it's just generally trending up. I think COVID was like a very specific hiccup where the people who were working the broadcasts in different capacities just didn't have access to the same tools that they previously did, and that impacted the quality of work, right? Someone's going
Mhm.
from like their tricked out work PC that has all these tools to, like for example, like has After Effects and like great Final Cut Pro and stuff like that, and they have to go to their Mac that's a lot less powerful, or their home PC that's a lot less powerful when they're working from home. Also, working from home, running a broadcast. I'm sure you, Sea Lion, you've run some broadcasts yourself and produce some things in some capacity. Even now
Mhm.
you're doing it from home, right? It's a very
Mhm.
different vibe, is the best way to put it, doing it from home versus if we were all in a room together, like a podcast studio doing this kind of stuff, right? Like there's
Mhm.
different audio checks you have to do, there's a different process to make sure the production is the highest level when you're in that situation versus, for example, a remote situation right now, which is the reality of COVID, which is why there was just lower quality production across the board. But I do think overall the production has increased quite significantly. Even like tier 2, tier 3 events have pretty great production quality across esports now, right? Even like tier 1 events that are being revived, like I was watching Evo Japan yesterday. It looked awesome.
Mhm.
Like it was a great event to watch. NACL is great to watch. VCT, like the challengers scene, great casters with good audio. I wish I joke. One of my friends is Degon, who's part of the LCK analyst desk. He used to cast my collegiate games in 2016, 2017,
Mhm.
and if you hear the audio quality of those casts and what was happening on screen during those casts, it's night and day compared to like the collegiate scene now. So uh, way better overall, and I think COVID was just a dip.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I'll jump in actually because I have some agreement and disagreement with what you said. I think from like a technological perspective, obviously it's always just gone up. Like
Yeah,
every 2 years, tech replaces itself. So like we're getting just better tech access, and it's just going to make things inherently sound and look better. But I think from like a kind of practical, like how is it constructed and is that what the fans want perspective, I would say it's almost been like logarithmic, where at the beginning it was someone in their house with their crappy computer and consumer internet running the best they can with what they have. And then very quickly, we're getting proper production facilities and studios. We're getting multiple camera angles. We're getting, all the different things. We're getting a desk plus full-time casters, and they're not having to like run between the
replays.
two sets. We're getting replays on the plays.
Mhm.
We're getting like actual professional observers that have mastered each game's individual observing tool and replay tool. But once we hit that, like, okay, we've caught up to like the capacity of like a full production studio and what the average like person can master in this replay tool, we kind of leveled out. We got very complacent. People got a little too, okay with what we were doing. And we're like, we can just do this formula forever and this is never going to be a problem. But kind of to the point of like how media consumption's changed over time, I think the average fan often doesn't actually care what happens between the game, and ultimately that's just us dressing up the setup time, right? We're trying to keep
Mhm.
people tuned in as best we can between the games, knowing that they're here for the games and nothing else. But I
Yeah,
think a lot of people, because we were trying to emulate that sports broadcast feel of like, using hockey as a comparison here, right? You have a 20-minute kind of game period, and then you have a like in between intermission where it's a pretty hefty amount of time. It's like at least 10 minutes between periods. That doesn't necessarily need to be that long for esports. We can have an hour-long game of like League of Legends, Dota, Counter Strike, whatever the case may be, followed by like a 5 to 10 minute break, and then another hour-long game. But we kind of got a little too excited about trying to do as much as we can and like overgrowing that 5 minute chunk between the game, and would just kind of like be willing to dress it up way too much and kind of mess with things. And I think one of a good recent example of us kind of pointing in the right direction was when Mark Z joined the LCS before it became the LTA and said, okay, this split, we're going to do the draft in the green room and we're going to make this as fast as possible between games. We're going to like speed run this. And every single fan ubiquitously was like, this is good, do more of this. Like immediately. And that was I think one of the few times where there was like a very clear publicly visible fan outcry of like, we liked the thing the production decided to do. Whereas I'm sure the average production every year is changing dramatically, but the average fan probably isn't even picking up on the nuance because there's such like tiny little like marked improvements that are very like minimally visible.
yeah, and also to jump on this, they're even less visible because of the co-streaming thing that we were talking about
Yeah,
before, right?
exactly.
Like,
Mhm.
like how can we see these current improvements in production when the streamer's playing GeoGuessr in the in between, right? Like, I
Yeah.
think that's
Mhm.
another aspect that makes it really difficult to celebrate the growth of that infrastructure appropriately.
And I think this would be directed more to Robert because again, Robert, you have both experience within the esports production and broadcast where you've observed that's this kind of environment, but also you have that background in traditional athletics. Would you say that when esports first started with their production and broadcast, I'm guessing they took a lot of inspiration from traditional athletics broadcasting. Do you think that infrastructure, translating from traditional athletics like sports like basketball into esports actually helped the infrastructure grow or helped production and broadcasting grow, or did it hinder it more so?
Mm, I think a little from column A, a little from column B. I think the good parts were it gave us like a north star to aim for regarding professionalization of the broadcast. It
Mhm.
brought in quite a good array of talent. Dash is the example that springs to my mind of someone that just made the broadcast kind of amazing. Like he was very very professional, very entertaining, very clean. And I think that the bad part really is kind of that over push to become the next kind of traditional sports broadcast. And we copied a
Mm.
lot from traditional sports, and we kind of forgot about our roots a little bit from a gaming point of view. And I think that we're kind of gone back to that, and maybe gone back to where we thought we were, but I think we missed a mark a little bit regarding some of the things that are going on. Um, it feels like it's trying to copy and paste something that should work for gamers, but still feels a little bit off the mark. And that's why, to Jonathan's point about like bringing down the gap between games is kind of correct, because people are generally just there for the actual video games, and you can't compete with, someone playing GeoGuessr or someone like ranting and raving. I think one part I wanted to bring up is like, from a societal point of view, the entertainment that we have right now compared to what we had 20 years ago is vastly different. Like in terms of how it just like stimulates our dopamine receptors. From back then, it's like it was a very organic, it was very real, and now you can't compete with. You're sitting in your bedroom, and we know that a lot of these big streamers have a giant broadcasting studio behind them, and he's like, "Oh my god, it's Will Smith has just walked into my bedroom." Crazy. You can't compete with that kind of pre-planned entertainment, because people are watching these things and it's more and more zany, more and more crazy. It's like the difference between The Simpsons and Family Guy. It's just like you're like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, and you don't really care that it's not real, that it's not reality, that it's all pre-planned and fake. You watch it. So whenever you're watching it, one example I have is like Cateril. He was on the broadcast, very analytical, very, one of the better commentators. And if you watch his
Mhm.
content now, not saying it's bad, but he's very entertaining. He's definitely moved away from an analytical kind of point of view and more of a entertainment point of view. And he's reaping the benefits from it, because that's what people want to see. They want to see people who are reacting a little bit over the top, that are doing things that are a little bit more outlandish. And he has 90K people watching him compared to, the main broadcast getting like 30K or something. So that's what the consumer wants to see these days. And I think right now, unless you were to bring all of these different personalities like on the official broadcast, I don't think you can compete with Tarek and these people, because that's what
Mhm.
the audience want to see.
Mhm.
And from a traditional sports point of view, that's what they're doing on the broadcast anyway. They have former pro players. Like, I'm a Manchester United fan, unfortunately, and I'm watching my old the players that used to play for the old team back in the day rant and rave and complain about the current team, because that's what I want to see. Because I don't know,
Yeah,
I'm a
softy for Gary Neville. Yeah, just
just like Gary Neville and Roy Keane, people like this. It's
yeah.
just the way they communicate, the way they kind of like lambast the current team. It's very entertaining,
Mhm.
and I know it's entertaining, but I also choose to listen to them over like an official broadcast if I have a choice. So it's not just in esports; it's traditional sports as well, where the talking heads have to be very kind of they have to say interesting things, and even if it's incorrect, they're
Mhm.
doing it to be contrarians. And
Yeah,
for some reason, in society, in this current period in time, it's what everyone wants to see or listen to.
yeah, all these
Mhm.
competitive spaces are embracing the parasocial. I mean, like today, literally today, Michael Jordan just got announced to be a broadcast commentator for the NBA playoffs, right?
Are
Like,
you serious?
yeah, literally today. Yeah, I was
Oh
proud,
wait,
just
I gotta
saw the
watch that.
news. But
Mhm.
so it's interesting. Like, I actually think there's a lot of potential there on the esports side to do a lot of these things that we're talking about, but to do them in a way that Jonathan was mentioning, which is like meet people where they are, right? And there's so many ways that we can do that through embracing the parasocial element by and embracing this new reality of I mean, it's twofold. The new reality of people being way more online, but I also think nowadays, because we're in this like post-COVID, uh, everyone's itching to do stuff with their lives point in time, that we can also start to like reignite these like roadshow possibilities to literally meet people where they are, right? Like
Mhm.
the the LEC has done a great job of this. I think Masters Toronto, the next month, or I guess it starts this month technically, end of this month is going to be a great example of this. Like all these opportunities to do road shows and potentially to do these road shows in a very economical way. These bigger ones, if we're talking like the Austin Major, MSI, VCT Toronto, Masters Toronto. Like these are like big productions or multi-million-dollar productions, and these are things that hopefully we have the privilege of enjoying for the near future. But on a lower level, there's like an economical opportunity to do these same things at like fan conventions or equivalents where if we're talking like grassroots esports, like that's how esports really started, was an addendum to a larger fan convention or larger entertainment event, right? Like I remember PAX East when I was in CLOL used to be the finals for CLOL. When UBC would win it every year because those guys were too good. But
Mhm.
like there is an opportunity for us to embrace that and to meet people where they are and get people who are adjacent to esports, who aren't currently interested in esports, interested again through being a part of events like that, right? So just kind of pulling all of these strands of thought together to just say like there are all these large productions and they're great ways of generating fan engagement, but meeting people where they are and embracing a parasocial element of fan engagement is also going to be very important for the future. And you can do that in large scale productions or small scale productions through these kinds of attaching yourself to these adjacent entertainment opportunities.
And for the sake of time, we are running out of time, so unfortunately, we won't have a lot of time for Q&A. So I just wanted to ask you guys your final thoughts on the topic of esports infrastructure. And I'll start with you, Jonathan. What do you have any final thoughts or last points that you want to mention to the audience about this topic?
Yeah, I think from my perspective at least, there's been so much done right and wrong over the last like 5 to 10 years of esports that I think now is a really good opportunity now that like we're no longer under the thumb of like venture capital, massive companies and stuff like that, that we can kind of pick and choose from the lessons we've learned which things are actually worth doing and which things we really, ought to not repeat as far as mistakes go. So I think like, keeping things reasonable, keeping things for what what this whole thing is about, which is entertaining fans, building fandom, building kind of a community within the esports and gaming industry, and making sure we're optimizing for the things that actually benefit that, right? So instead of the massive multi-million-dollar facility, get a more, small scale office, and then use the extra money to kind of get partnerships and marketing folks to actually get people to watch the games, get people involved with your teams, do activations, not just in, where your team happens to be running day-to-day operations, but across like the continental United States and Americas, potentially abroad for larger event opportunities. But like meet people where they are, build things that they want to see, and do things that they actually want to engage with, and make sure that we're not kind of missing the forest for the trees amongst this massive industry.
And move on to you, Robert. What any final thoughts do you have regarding esports infrastructure that you want to leave the audience with?
It's the same as Jonathan. It's pretty much taking account of the money that you have. If you have money, it's really easy to spend it, especially if you. And I've spoken to a few colleges that say, "Oh, the TL training facility has this and this and this, and we're going to get that." I'm like, I don't even think TL need that or any team needs that to be successful. Per the Cloud9 versus everyone else kind of comparison, I think that what I'd like to see is for colleges to look at what Jonathan said about marketing and getting eyes on the product, but like sustainability for me is like really important. Like you can have a facility, you can have things to help the program for a competitive point of view, but you have to kind of project and hope that you can keep that going for a much longer period of time. We've had examples of teams winning CLOL then immediately disbanding their program like a month later, which I think is ridiculous because if you're not in it for the right reasons, you're always going to fail and you're always going to not find that success. So they should probably, or people should probably learn from the people that have seen the pitfalls of that money coming into the scene and how it's being spent and how it should be spent. And even if it's from a consultancy point of view, I think it's important for collegiate programs to not kind of feel like this is our time to shine. The money's coming in because it'll eventually run out unless you find a way to not just monetize from a money point of view, but monetize people's interest and time.
And finally, Gabriel, any final thoughts you want to leave with the viewers as well regarding esports infrastructure?
Yeah, I want to co-sign what both Jonathan and Robert has said, and if I have any addendum to it at all, it's just on the competitive side. I think it's really important that we didn't really talk about this at all, but I really think it's important that competitive infrastructure builds up people as much as it builds up players, right?
Mhm.
That infrastructure that's in development is not just professionalizing the space that they operate in, but also professionalizing the people themselves and making sure that they are appropriately ready for a world where they operate in the industry in a different capacity, or operate in the industry, or may not operate in the industry, after their playing or working career there is over too, right? And I think a lot of corporate infrastructure does a pretty good job of that overall, and I think we can take lessons from that over here as well. And I think it's especially true in collegiate, where the whole goal is to prepare people for life in a professional capacity, and a career outside of the academic pursuits they have. So just generally, I think that's like a great note to end on. But again, want to co-sign what those two said as well.
hmm Thank you so much, guys. And thank you, everybody, for participating in our panel and joining us, listening to some of these very, very important insights for esports in particular. But thank you so much to our sponsors as well. Start off with our first and, one of our long lasting sponsors is going to be BMO. And to help you focus on what's important, BMO has checking and savings account, credit cards, and borrowing options designed for students. Plus, get $125 cash and 6 months of Domino's pizza. We all know you guys love Domino's, okay? With BMO's current student offers. So make sure to check out BMO there, and thank you so much. As well as BMO Next Level is their Twitch channel and Discord server dedicated to helping you level up not only in game, but also in your personal finances. So join Sean Frame, BMO's gaming relations specialist, as he plays through your favorite titles while giving detailed walkthroughs on financial topics that matter to you. So make sure to check out linktree.com/BMO and XTLVL. And same thing for their Twitch. We also like to thank our other sponsor, which is Strawberry and Egg, which is a new local business located in Vancouver, BC, that specializes in making large video game and anime themed plushies. They also make smaller items like keychains, headphone accessories, and flower bouquets. Everything's 100% handmade with quality as a top priority. They also take custom orders and commissions, so just send a message through their Instagram at Capital Strawberry and Egg, or on Discord to Ridalia, and it's 15% off all items if you say that CIE sent you. As well as also thank you so much, Solaris. They are an esports team based in Vancouver, BC, that has Marvel Rivals and Overwatch competition. Thank you so much for sponsoring CIE as well. So make sure to check them out at Twitter, Solaris_GG. My name was Z Lion, and I was your host. And thank you so much again, Jonathan, Gabriel, Robert. You guys have been absolutely amazing for joining us with this esports infrastructure panel. And make sure to check out the next panel that's actually directly after this, and it's going to be careers in gaming and esports. And the panel is going to be at 2 p.m. PST or 5 p.m. EST. So make sure to check that out, guys. And we will see you guys very, very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.